Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Loki Mayberg. I'm on the Teams platform team. Specifically, I lead the team that has the charter around collaborative app experiences inside of Teams. And we spent a lot of time thinking about collaboration in Teams and how we can make it simpler and more powerful. So, what's this talk about? In essence, I was trying to sit down and figure out if I had to go and build a collaborative app in Teams, my ideal, perfect collaborative app with the tools and technology that's available today, how would I go about it? And in what order would I build it? And how would I be able to talk about why I'm building it in this way? So the talk's going to be divided up into two main parts. The first one is really about the MVP experience, about collaboration and collaboration around links, and laying the foundation for more features and integrations in the future. Part two is about those investments and how you can build on top of the bot to have better bidirectional collaboration experiences inside of Teams. At the very end, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been working on and what you can see around the corner, what just recently shipped inside of Teams for developers. This talk is going to be a little bit on the technical side. It's also for IT admins or just anyone who's looking to learn more about collaboration with apps inside of Teams and the direction that we're heading in. So like I said in the beginning, I spent a lot of time thinking about collaboration. And people will come to me and tell me, I have this app in Teams and it's helping me collaborate. And oftentimes I find myself having to push back. When people talk about their applications that way, it's often about productivity. The app is helping the person be more productive in Teams, but it's not necessarily a collaborative app. And I think it's a really, really important distinction that we just try all to understand and lay the framing around that. What is collaboration? When I think of collaboration, I think of all the people, but also the messages, the decisions, the notes, the arguments, the meetings, all of that chaos that is happening that helps a team deliver something. Now, collaboration and productivity are usually very closely tied together. For example, you can collaborate with a group, you can come together, have a meeting, talk about who's going to work on what, disagree and align on various parts of the project, and then after that collaboration is done, you go off and you do your work where you're being productive. There's also collaboration and productivity as a group. So if the group is collaborating, it can help the group be more productive. But also collaboration can be an impediment to productivity. I think we've all been there. That's something that I've been calling collaboration or coordination. So coordination friction. We've all been there. There's just so many people. You have to keep everyone in the loop. You have to send messages here. This person isn't there. I have to get them into the loop. That's where collaboration can actually be an impediment to productivity. So I think the next question, now that we've kind of understood the difference between collaboration, that messy people, messages, meetings, decisions, arguments, notes, that's what collaboration looks like. Where do apps fit into all of this? And I think we have to start looking at app links. When was the last time you went to the App Store and you just browsed the App Store to look for a random app to install? Probably do that about once, maybe twice a year. I know that's what I do. But how often do you share a link to an application? Whether that's a Jira ticket, ServiceNow ticket, a Figma file, then what happens after that? You're talking about it. You're going to have a meeting about it. You're going to argue about it. And I think that's where we want to start the next part of this conversation is how can we introduce collaboration around app links that are shared inside of Teams? There are millions of links that get shared per day in Teams. Those are often app links, and there's a bunch of chatter that happens around it. So first of all, when we think about the shared app content user journey, we think about, let's take Jira as an example. First, the user shares the Jira ticket. They go into the browser, they copy the link, and they share it out. Next, they might notify some people about it. They might mention someone. Some people might have notifications set in a channel. They find out about this thing that just got shared. Other people can also find it organically. They can find it in there by searching or just finding it in the message history. But at the end of the day, what typically happens is someone opens that Jira link. They take a look at the ticket, or they take a look at the YouTube video, or they take a look at the Figma file, And then they come back into Teams and they write something about it. They say, this looks good, or this is behind schedule. And a bunch of people will have a bunch of back and forth about that link, and that's where the collaboration happens. So that's kind of the framing of what a content user journey looks like when they're sharing and collaborating on links. So why do we want to do this? And I think links have the ability to be viral. So what I mean by that is the person shares out the link, and we want to make sure that that link sharing is easy and robust and beautiful. After that, when the user opens the link, earlier on, the user was opening it up in the browser. But there are certain things you can do in Teams you can't do in the browser. So how can we bring some of those tools to make it more compelling for the user to say, look, it's not quite the same as Edge or Chrome, but Teams has all of these additional collaboration tools that I'm getting for free when I open it up inside of Teams. With those tools, people will spend more time in the application inside of Teams because we have these tools available to them. We've noticed that there's a rather large uptick if we have the content and collaboration pieces side by side inside of Teams. More messages are being sent, people are spending more time in that application in Teams. And then finally, other people are discovering all of this chatter that is happening around them, and it pulls people in. They see, oh, there's discussions happening on this Jira ticket or this Figma file. And that encourages them to take the same link and share it out even further. And links are easy to share. And like I said, there are millions of them getting shared all the time. And I think that's the real place where we want to start the rest of the talk. Let's start with links. Let's look what that's going to look like. So first, in this scenario, Daniela wants to discuss an upcoming product launch, and she's created a diagram in her trusty diagram app. So the first thing she does, she goes over to the browser, she copies the link, and she pastes it in. She writes a message, she pastes in the link to that diagram inside of this external application. Next, she sees a preview card. We call these adaptive cards. Now, this is a very important screen because what's happened here is Daniela didn't even know that the application existed in the Teams App Store. She probably didn't even know that there was a Teams App Store. But here she suddenly finds out, whoa, that diagramming tool that I'm using outside of Teams, it's actually available inside of Teams. And not only that, the application's able to show at least some information to them, but maybe it can't overshare because this person hasn't installed or isn't a user of that application. So because of that, the application can say, we can show this to Daniela, but we're really going to need her to sign in if we want to show anything more than that. So what does Daniela do next? She signs in to the application. And the sign-in experience actually installs the application for Daniela. So it's a much better way of acquiring the application and finding out about it and installing it. Way better than going to the App Store and discovering that this Contoso diagramming app exists. After the app has been installed and they've signed in, you'll notice that the card gets redrawn. And this time around, because they are signed in, the application can show a little bit more information to them. In this case, a preview image, when it was last edited, and 2 buttons to view that content and then to share that content into a meeting. Those buttons we're going to be talking about, and we're going to be talking about all of how you would build these experiences. Okay, so let's keep the story going. So they share this out, and as is usual, someone opens it up and writes a message about it. So here Mona is responding to them about this. Okay, so what do those buttons do? When someone clicks view, the application can open it up in a window, one of our app content stage windows. It's called the collab stage window. This is great because what it does is it puts the conversation on the right and it puts the content of that application to the left. So sure, it's probably not the same as opening it up in a Chrome browser, but not only does this application have much more awareness of what's happening inside of Teams, But to Daniela, in this case, they can also have the conversation and the content side by side. I mean, how many times has someone shared a YouTube video with you, open it up in the browser, watch a part of the YouTube video, and then you go back to write a comment about it? This way, it's much easier to just do that inline. You know what else is really, really difficult about Teams sometimes when you open up an application is multitasking. And by opening it up in a pop-out window, it's much easier to multitask as well and to get back to other messages or other notifications. Okay, so back in the chat, someone decides that they want to start a meeting. So let's start that meeting right now. And then in this story, Daniela decides that she wants to share the diagram to the group. So she clicks that share in meeting button here on the right-hand side of that card. They get asked to confirm, being told, hey, you're going to start sharing this with everyone. When they click start sharing, that same piece of content is now shown to everyone in the meeting window. And you'll also notice that in Teams meetings, we're able to draw other elements like cursors, who's presenting, and a whole bunch of other multiplayer experiences that we're going to be talking about as well, and how you would build those. Okay, that concludes the user experience. Let's talk about how you'd actually build these experiences and what that would look like. So technically, what I showed you is broken up into two main categories: link unfurling and app content stages. So let's walk through the diagram that's on the right-hand side of the slides. So a user pastes in a link. That link gets sent to the bot. The bot unfurls the link, understands it, and returns an adaptive card that user can then, it gets attached to the message body before they send it out. And then they send out the card. And on the card is the opportunity for someone to open it up into one of two content stages. So the backbone of this entire experience is the bot. The bot is really the foundation upon which we build all of the rest of this. One of those things is called a messaging extension. We're going to talk about those. Messaging extension is a way for your bot to register for links. And when that link gets pasted in, for that bot to understand and be able to return something in response. Also, there are two content stages. The meeting stage is the one that gets opened up in the meeting, and the collab stage is the one that gets opened up outside of the meeting. And then finally, the multiplayer experiences that I showed, that's with something called Live Share, using our Live Share SDK, and I'll talk about that as well. So the very first thing you need to go off and do is go and set up your messaging extension. So this is in the Teams developer portal. I'm just creating a new app. I'm skipping the bot part of this because you'll see in the messaging extensions section, I'm just going to select an existing bot, but there is an option to create a new bot if you don't have one already. With that created, the next thing to do is to go and register your domain. So once the domain is added, what this allows the bot to do is whenever a URL gets pasted in with that domain, the bot gets sent a message that says, someone pasted in this YouTube video or Jira ticket. What kind of a preview do you want to send back to them to attach in their message body? So let's talk about link unfurling. Link unfurling turns links into adaptive cards that can be attached to the message. The main way that this is done is through something called an invoke request. And the invoke event is a special event that gets sent to the bot. And one of those that you're going to be listening for is the query link invoke event. That query link invoke event is what's going to send the full URL to the bot to handle and return something in response to that. The response payload, after you get the message or the invoke request with that URL, is to then return an adaptive card. And you can see that on the right-hand side. You can also return a tiny little preview of the card if you want. Okay, but what happens if the user is not signed in yet? So this works well for YouTube videos where they're publicly available and it's easy for me to take in a YouTube link and return a card about that YouTube video. What if it's something that's a Jira ticket or that Contoso diagramming application? We have something called zero install link unfurling. It works very much the same as regular link unfurling, except instead of just a query link invoke event, you're going to get an anonymous query link invoke event. That just means the user isn't signed in yet. So if the user isn't signed in yet, you have one of two ways of responding. There are two types of responses. There's the classic result response that just gives the full payload for the full adaptive card back. But then there's also an auth response. So you can still structure the adaptive card, but if you say, I need this person to sign in to see more, you send the auth response, and that's how you get that little sign in section of the adaptive card. It's a great way to show a little bit of something, let the user know that, hey, this application's available in here. This is about as much as we're allowed to show, and if we want to show more, we're really going to need them to sign in. Okay, so to recap, all we've built up until this point is the link unfurling part, okay? All that we've done is we've used our bot and our messaging extension, which is an extension on the bot, to listen for URLs, and we're able to return something back that gets attached to the message body in the compose box. Okay, let's talk about those buttons for a second. Again, there are two content stages, very important. We have our meeting stage and our collab stage. This is where app content is embedded into Teams, and it's also where you can use our client-side library to do a little bit more Teamsy things and understand a little bit more about Teams that you wouldn't be able to get if you opened it up in the browser. So these ones are pretty simple. I could finally say it's just a deep link. It's just a deep link for both of them. So let's talk about the collab stage deep link. What you're going to do is you're going to put your button into your adaptive card. That button is just going to be a deep link, and the deep link looks like that on the right. The main thing to be aware of is the content URL. The content URL is what we actually embed inside of that window. It's not the same as the website URL. It can be, but sometimes it's important to do slightly different things or host it on a slightly different endpoint when it's being run inside of Teams. For example, if you share a YouTube video today and you send it out, you'll notice that what we open up in the window isn't youtube.com. It's a slightly different URL. That's the content URL. The website URL is the one that was the canonical URL that was shared. This has been a really, really important feature for us. We've noticed a lot of more engagement, more messages being sent, more time being spent in this window, and people like the multitasking of this as well. So because of that, we're going to continue investing in the collab stage window in the future. The next is the meeting stage experience. Same as before, it's a deep link. The content URL we were talking about earlier is called the app sharing URL in this instance. But this is the URL that gets opened up in the meeting stage for everyone else to see at the same time. Okay, but we haven't spoken about how we get the cursors and the cursor sharing and the presence and all of that stuff in the meeting stage window. And to build these real-time multiplayer experiences, we have a turnkey solution called the LiveShare SDK. It's pretty cool once you start playing with it. Very, very proud of this feature and what it's able to do in very, very short period of time for developers. So let's talk about what the LiveShare SDK is. Like I said, real-time collaboration. It allows people to collaborate in real time like you would in a Figma file or in a Google Doc or in a Loop workspace. That's the main thing that LiveShare is really, really good at, keeping people in sync. Next is we have a rich inking and cursor overlay toolset that you can just use turnkey in the SDK itself, and I'll have a slide about that as well. Next is video and audio synchronization. So you can co-watch videos together. So back to the YouTube example, if you share a YouTube link, you're going to get the card. If you click the Share in Meeting button and you open it up inside of Teams in a Teams meeting, it's using our video and audio synchronization stack behind the scenes to keep the video playback in sync for everyone. So it's really, really good for teachers who want to be able to show YouTube videos to the class and make sure everyone's at the same spot at the same time. It's really tailored for teams, so we take care of a lot of the team's boilerplate for you for getting user IDs and presence and making sure that it's really custom built and themed for teams. And it's also secured by M365 and our Azure pipeline as well. And finally, there's very, very little friction in the development. We had a partner of ours build the video and audio synchronization feature in their existing video tool in about one sprint. So really, really proud of what LiveShare SDK has been able to do for us. Let's talk about the LiveShare canvas. So like I mentioned, there's a bunch of inking overlays and inking tools available to you. There's the pen, highlighter, eraser, laser pointer, lines, and more. So you don't have to think about these things. They just come turnkey out of the box with a LiveShare SDK. We also do cursor sharing. So we can also do live cursor sharing. So it's really cool to see how people are using this today, whether it's in manufacturing or if it's in CAD or 3D CAD diagrams, or if it's being used by other presentation tools as well. Two other really important little pieces in here. We have live events. This allows you to broadcast events to everyone in the meeting in real time. Really, really good for knowing when people join or when people do anything. And then we also have the live media session, which allows us to synchronize audio and video playback, but we also do other little things. We can do audio ducking. So if someone speaks, we can duck the audio. And that's the LiveShare SDK. Okay, so in the beginning, I gave a big, long talk about productivity versus collaboration and how they're kind of apart, but also kind of similar. So how does productivity fit into this collaboration story that I just told? So we have what are called personal apps. You've probably seen these. They're the ones pinned to the app bar on the left-hand side. They're really just personal to you. There's no group context here. They're not in a channel. They're not in a meeting. They're not in a chat. They're great for productivity, finding things, working on things, creating new things. But they're also really, really good for finding things that you want to work on and then ultimately share to collaborate. So this is how you go from the productivity story here in the personal app to where you can share it to a group and kick off the collaboration flow inside of a group chat or inside of a channel. And so this is our share dialogue. All of the stuff that we were talking about before around link unfurling, that'll just work inside of the share dialogue as well. So now that this Alpine launch diagram will be shared out to other people to collaborate on. So our share dialogue allows you to open up a share dialogue inside of Teams. Pretty simple. URL to share. Optionally, you can put a message in there if you want to. And then you can also decide if you do or do not want to have a preview available inside of the card. So that basically concludes the first part of the talk, where we're talking about building, if you're thinking about collaboration, you're wanting to build a collaborative app in Teams, and you wanted some guidance on the direction to start with, that was the first part of what we just spoke about. It's all about sharing links and collaborating on links, making sure that those links can be viral, and opening up those content in our content stages. The next part of the talk is going to talk about, well, what can I do next? What can I do after that? So specifically, we built that bot, and it is the age of AI. So it's probably important we talk about AI at some point, but really, what can we now do with that bot that we've created? Can we do more than just links and collaborating around links? And that's going to be next. I love this screenshot or this mock-up because it is my ideal end state for a collaborative app experience inside of Teams. There's a lot happening here, so I wanted to just break it down, and I'm hoping you can see it. First of all, this is a channel called the marketing channel. In here, you'll notice that our bot proactively created a channel post. And the channel post is about this Alpine launch that's happening. And you'll notice that it's keeping the conversation focused. In here, you can see all of the people who've been messaging and talking about this specific entity that's inside of the application. So the conversation is focused. There's meetings that can happen around it as well. So now also the meetings are tied to that thing. And then finally at the very bottom, I'm hoping you can see in the back, you'll notice that the bot is not just it didn't just initiate the original post, but it's able to keep other people in the loop about the happenings of that entity outside of Teams as well. So in here, it's saying that Mona added a note probably outside somewhere else. And that helps reduce what I was talking about earlier around coordination friction. It's really difficult when you're trying to make a decision and you're trying to work with people and you don't feel like you have all of the context. The bot can help proactively keep everyone in the loop about what's happening. So let's start with the first part of this. How do we create focused and proactive conversations? So what's happening here is the bot is proactively creating a channel post. And that's done with something called proactive messaging in our bot framework. It allows the bot to send proactive messages. There are some permissions tied to doing it in a group or in to an individual if they don't have permission. But if they do have permission, or the bot has been added to the channel, they can start proactively messaging. The bot can also @mention people, and the bot can also then do replies on that as well, send reply messages. Next, I want to talk about the Teams AI library. So, do you remember how bots were before AI? I always like to ask, does anyone know how to subscribe to GitHub notifications using the GitHub bot in Slack or Teams? And it's so confusing because it's different for GitHub than it is for Jira, than it is for ADO. Some of them is subscribe, some of them is notification settings. You can't always remember the command. Same problem exists with Jira or tasks. Is it create task or is it create work item? You can't always remember what the correct action is. So the Teams AI library is really good at figuring out the intent and mapping it to an action that has been created. In addition to that, you can also just have a natural conversation with the bot. So in that previous screen where I was showing you the bot had proactively created a channel post, and it's also participating in that conversation, people can also now @mention the bot and just ask it in conversational language to do something, or what's the latest. So I'm going to go back for a second. So in this section here where Mona added a note, you could ask the bot who else has added notes recently, or ask it to summarize something for you. The AI library is also really, really good and flexible, so it allows you to use your own LLM if you choose to. It does have a little bit of a plugin system there in the back. So highly recommend if you're building a bot, you should strongly, strongly consider using the Teams AI library to make it more conversational. Next, I want to just talk about authentication for a little bit. This is all about, I would say, about making sure that when you are building this, you are thinking through holistically the entire user experience. And authentication is something that doesn't always get thought through until way too late. So it's important in the beginning, when you're building your application. There are so many little components available inside of Teams. You can build a bot, you have a messaging extension, you have some Canvas application, you have an external application. Please, please, please don't go and create separate Microsoft Entra ID app registrations for them. Don't go and create one that's separate for the bot that it is for your web application. Because if they're all connected, then user consent, can propagate to all of those experiences. So if a user says it's okay for me to give my email address to this application, then you don't have to install the bot a couple of days later and then go, why is it asking me this again? if they're all connected under the same app registration, it's really, really easy to have consent propagate through to all of the user experience. Also just makes IT management a lot easier as well when there's only one app registration. And with Teams SSO, you can get an access token for that user on any device. So if the user has consented one time using the same unified app registration, then if they use that application on their mobile app, iPad app, in the web browser, they're not going to get asked again to consent. But this is Microsoft's a Microsoft Entra single sign-on. It's not always the case that the user using your application is connected using their AAD account or their Microsoft Entra account. Maybe they have their own email and password. I know I do for GitHub. So that's why we strongly recommend that people consider something called account linking. Account linking is pretty simple. Teams can tell you who the person is in Teams pretty easily. So once you say, give me this user's access token, so I can figure out who they are, assuming you have the right permissions to do so, then the next step is find out who they are in your application. Find out who they are if you're GitHub or Adobe or Jira. What's their email and password? Can you sign them in here? Now, when you know who they are in Teams and you know who they say they are in your application, just link those two together. So that way, when the user signs in with their Teams identity, you can immediately bridge that and connect it to their external identity that's in your own application. And that's something called account linking that we strongly recommend. There are a bunch of tools available to you. A lot of the visuals that you were seeing earlier that we put inside of our own applications, we use our own Figma UI kit. So the one that we use internally is the one that's usually just a couple months behind before it goes public for everyone else. So check out our Figma UI kit. There's also a bunch of code samples. So you can really, really play around with it, both from a user experience perspective, but also see kind of what the developer experience would look like. We also have a developer portal. You saw a video of me using the developer portal earlier. It's a great place to manage your app manifest, make sure it's valid, manage your publication, how many people are using your application, any announcements or changes that you should be aware of. The developer portal is great for that. And then last but not least, in the middle, our Teams toolkit is awesome. It's really, really good. It's my go-to place when I'm thinking about building a Teams application. The samples are really, really good. The environment that it creates for you with tunneling, hot reloading, and a whole bunch of other stuff that it just does for you out of the box. The Teams toolkit is really, really good. So go to your Visual Studio Code Marketplace, find the Teams toolkit and install it. Try it out if you haven't already. So if you go to the marketplace inside of Visual Studio Code, you can find it in there to install it. And then once it's installed, it'll walk you through your first application. You have to connect it to a Microsoft account, but it'll help set up, connect it to a test tenant and get everything set up for you. I'm trying to see if in the image I can see. Okay, so in the screenshot, I'm clicking the Teams icon in the left-hand side of the app bar to invoke the Teams toolkit. Just above it is our little app icon. Click on that little app icon, you can go in there and you can type in Teams toolkit. Okay, that concludes everything that I have to say about building a collaborative app in Teams. So to recap, in the beginning, I gave some framing about the difference between collaboration and productivity. I was really trying to share what I think is the best place to start for collaboration, get you the most ROI and the most bang for your buck. And that starts with link sharing, because it's such a natural thing that we all do every day. So build link unfurling and connect it to one of our 2 app content stages. After you're done that, you have a bot that you built or that you created in the very, very beginning. Do more with that bot. Send proactive messages, use the Teams AI library, and make sure that the bot is a participant in the conversations and the happenings inside of Teams, and that it can be bidirectional as well. You could talk to it, and that it can post updates and messages inside of a contained group chat or inside of a contained channel thread, and really keep the conversation and the meetings and the people and everyone focused around a single piece of content. And then finally, at the end, I was talking about SSO and all of the dev tools that are available to you. I know this is also a pretty IT admin heavy conference as well, so I wanted to just share a few other little things, but just some other upcoming improvements that you need to be aware of. So first, we have ratings and reviews now in the App Store. This is a great way for people to get feedback about the quality of their application and to understand where it makes sense for them to start making changes. It helps keep your users and IT admins informed as well. So we've got ratings and reviews inside of the Teams App Store. Rolling out soon is streamlined app installs. So previously, the way that it used to work was you go to the App Store, you find your application, you click on it, and you say, I want to install it. And then it asks you which team or channel or group chat, where do you want to install it? And then you install it. And then you want to install it in another one and set it up in another one, and you have to go through it every single time. In this case, what we've done is you install it for yourself personally first, and then we ask you where else you want to install the application. So much easier installation flow from the Teams App Store, and those changes are coming soon, sometime later this spring. We've also made a couple of changes or enhancements to the developer experience. We've made a couple of small tweaks to adaptive cards. It's much easier now to style action buttons. You don't have to keep track of all the different themes. It's much easier to have consistent theming, even though the themes in Teams can change. We've also made it easier to add avatars inside of your adaptive card. Now you just need their user ID, and then you can start decorating your adaptive card with their profile photo. On the permission and consent side, we have had the ability for an application to send notifications to people, but it always required admin approval. Now that consent can be bundled into the application so that when a user installs it, they can also start getting sent notifications about it. We get sent notifications all the time about the various apps that we use internally. Viva, especially the Viva applications, we get sent a lot of notifications by those. We've also made it easier. We've also added a bunch of other permissions as well, and we're going to keep making permissions more granular, and we're going to start just making our permissioning system much more robust around applications, so you don't feel like you're just approving everything all at once. Lastly, we have something called instant app tabs. So if you've ever pinned a tab in Teams, you have to go through a configuration dialog, like a setup dialog. So you're in a channel, you click the plus button, and then you have to go through that setup experience. You no longer have to do that with what we're calling these instant app tabs. That's the instant part, is you see the app, you click on it, and it just instantly pins it to the header bar. It's something that developers have to opt in for, but it is a much, much better experience for end users. Also, the app part of instant app tabs is we're finally going to start treating these more like pinning apps. So today you can pin the YouTube app, but you can also pin it a second time and a third time and a fourth time. So what this does is it just says, look, you just pin one single YouTube app. So you click plus, you find YouTube, you click on it, and it's instantly pinned. So this is rolling out pretty soon. And the way that this is done is with something called static tabs in Teams. So we've always had a bit of a fractured system with tabs, where we've had one way to build them for chats and channels, and we've had a different way to build them for personal apps. So finally, we have just something called static tabs, and they work everywhere. So you can build a single tab experience, and you can say, I want this in my personal app, I want this in a meeting, I want this in a chat, or I want this in a channel. So that's what instant app tabs are. We've also made a lot of improvements to the app, or we are making a lot of improvements to the app auth request flow. So the user wants to request an application that's in the App Store, but it's been very, very difficult for IT admins to manage those requests and understand who's requesting what. So we are adding new user request section inside of the app details inside of the IT admin portal. There's going to be new widgets letting you know about what people are requesting inside of your organization. There's also going to be, it's going to be easier for you to be able to find and filter for these requests. And then last but not least, if a user has requested an app and it gets approved, we'll send them a notification that says, hey, the admin has approved your request to use this application. A few other small changes that we're making, app-centric management. So now, instead of selecting individual users, you can now also select groups for users to have access to an application. So we're rolling that out as well. And, oh, another thing I have to mention. Previously, when you if you installed an app and you pinned it in the app bar for a set of people, there was usually a bit of a delay before it was pinned for them. So the IT admin's like, it's available, but it's not really available until a couple of hours or sometimes days later. So that's another thing that we are fixing as well to make that much, much, much faster so that IT admins feel like when they do something, it's reflected really quickly inside of Teams. And last but not least, when it comes to managing, so Teams permissions are complicated. And we're trying to make it easier for IT admins to be able to manage those permissions. And so what we're doing is you no longer have to go to some like Azure admin to approve some esoteric permissions. We're going to start giving a lot more control to the Teams admins to be able to start approving some of those resource scopes. So they're much more, they're more, it's not particular, but they're not as broadly scoped as I can just read everyone's email or everyone's calendar. It's usually scoped to that specific resource, which is usually just a chat or just a channel. And we're going to be able to allow IT admins to approve those as well. And that's it. This is probably a slide you want to take a photo of because it has all of the things that I spoke about. So these are going to be the short links. To recap, in the beginning, we spoke about building collaborative app links. And the links up there are going to be link unfurling, zero install, collab stage, meeting stage, live share. That was the first part of the talk. The second part was all about taking it to the next level. So sending proactive messages as a bot, starting those conversations, keeping the conversations focused, and then for people to start having a conversation with a bot. And you do that using the AI library. There's also a link to how our SSO works inside of Teams. And then we have Teams UI kit and developer portal. And if you want the Visual Studio Teams toolkit, open up Visual Studio, go find the little app icon in the app bar somewhere, click on it, just type in Teams. You'll probably find it in there to install. Well, thank you everyone for coming out this morning. I know it's early. I'm sure everyone had a difficult time after last night. I hope everyone had fun as well. Thank you everyone. And as per usual, I'll be available afterwards as well if anyone has any questions that they want to ask me. Thank you for coming out today.